Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be talking about how Donald Trump's poor or bad economy could benefit Democrats in 2025, 2026, and potentially 2028 as well, because the Atlanta Fed model shows bad signs for Donald Trump, or basically if you're a Republican, and they are predicting that the GDP is going to shrink to 2.8%, and they're calling it Trumpcession. Similar to Bidenflation, this time it's the exact opposite, so Trumpcession. And any GDP that is below 2% is actually considered a recession. And before we get started with the video, make sure you guys are subscribed, click the bell so you don't miss all my content. Press the like button, share this video. Don't forget we have memberships. If you are interested, you can find links to that in the description section. So an economist who predicted the biggest crash of the 21st century, I believe, actually is warning that Donald Trump could be blamed for the next recession. So recession is very close. As we all know, they're predicting the Atlanta Fed model 2.8%. And just like I mentioned earlier, that anything below 2% is considered a recession. So that is just 0.8% away if this is the real number, if the prediction is right. Just 0.8% away from an actual recession. Think about it. That is very, very close. So if we do go into the 2025 off-year elections with a bad Trump economy, it could affect the two governor races that we will have in the off-year election of 2025, Virginia and New Jersey. And these elections are actually similar to the 2021 governor elections of Virginia and New Jersey. So as we all know, Winsome Sears, who I believe is the current Attorney General of the state of Virginia, is looking to replace Glenn Youngkin because he can't run anymore. So she's looking to replace him as a Republican nominee. And she's going up against, I believe the Democrat is called, their name is Spadsberger. Tell me if I'm wrong. But she will be versing her. And the latest polls show bad signs for Winsome Sears, good signs for the Democrat. In this scenario, Spadsberger. So the latest poll actually has the Democrat Spansberger up by 6 points, and Winston Sears is at 40% in the poll, and Spansberger is polling at 46%. Now, the poll right before that actually showed it a tied race, but still Winston Sears is down by about 1 percentage point. So it's going to be close no matter what, as it is expected. Now, if you're going to say that, okay, most times polls do overestimate Democratic support. That is true, and even in 2024, most polls overestimated Kamala Harris. Okay, maybe Winsome Sears actually does have a better chance. I won't be shocked if Winsome Sears ends up winning, as she is the current Attorney General, so she can prove that she can win in the state of Virginia in very big, statewide races. But can she win as governor? It's going to take a lot, and I don't think she might have enough Republican support because some people call her Rhino neocon, so she's not really that MAGA. Actually, she's not that friendly to Donald Trump. That's what I heard, but I'm not quite so sure. Now, we go back to the GDP growth. If Donald Trump is going to have a bad economy going into these major races, that could hurt Republicans up and down the ballot. This will benefit Democratic support. So let's just say Winsome Sears ends up losing to Spansberger, especially because Donald Trump his a poor economy could, with the GDP, and prices, by the way, right now are at a all-time high, egg prices specifically, and it is true that bird flu has an impact on this, but still Biden was getting blamed by Republicans as well, so now we have to do the same thing for Donald Trump. Apparently he's the one to blame as well, and prices are at all-time highs. So I think Virginia's governor's race in the 2025 off-year election could definitely go to the Democrat defeating Winsome Sears, the current Attorney General of the state, I believe. And then as far as New Jersey goes, the Democrat in the 2021 off-year election, I believe, won in a very close election by about like 1 to 2%. And that's the first sign that we knew New Jersey would be close in the 2024 election, was when we had the 2021 election, because the Democrat won that off-year election for the governors by just about a percentage point. And just 3 years later, turns out that Donald Trump came within 5 to 6 points in this state. So as we all know, New Jersey going forward in the future is going to be a swing state. It's going to be competitive. It is no longer the solid blue state that you are used to seeing. Therefore, it's going to be extremely close. I think Republicans have a decent shot at winning this state. But considering the GDP growth, the economy is just an utter failure so far under Donald Trump. I mean, it's only been 2 months, so like we can't really. I'm not going to really blame him just yet. I'll give him some more time before I blame him, just like I blamed Biden. I will be fair to both. I do think New Jersey, New Jersey's governor's race in 2025 could go to the Democrat by a lean margin. So lean both of these races, it's going to be extremely close. Now, if Donald Trump, gets it together and fixes the economy like he promised to do so, which he's currently failing at that right now. I mean, it's true, he is failing at that promise. Prices are soaring up, and especially tariffs, by the way. I believe tariffs led to the Great Depression. And Donald Trump right now is imposing high tariffs on Canada and Mexico. 25% might even go beyond that because Canada is also doing the same thing as well. And that's just going to cause prices to increase even more. People are saying that it'll be passed down to the average, the consumer. And that's not going to be good. So that will definitely hurt the GDP growth. So I think Democrats can really benefit from that. And then there's another governor's race in 2026. That was the 2025 off-year election. But the 2026 governor's race will be very important as well. From a lot of key states like Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Maine as well, Georgia too. You can argue Vermont and New Hampshire. It depends who is running. Phil Scott is allowed to run in Vermont for another term. I believe they have unlimited term limits for some reason. Let me know if I'm wrong about that. But if Phil Scott does run, that will be a likely or probably solid Republican state, no matter what happens to the economy or the GDP. But as far as New Hampshire goes, Kelly Ayotte actually just recently won the 2024 election by about 3 percentage points, which is similar to the margin I predicted she would actually win by. I was actually extremely accurate. Out of probably anyone else, I can't find someone else more accurate than I was in my 2024 election predictions. Whether it was the Senate, the governor's race, or the general election, I happen to be probably the number one most accurate, which is why you should subscribe to my YouTube channel, by the way. But Kelly Ayotte I believe will run in this specific race. I think she's gonna win, but it's gonna be closer because I'm not saying Donald Trump could hurt these candidates, in the governor's race, the Senate, up and down the ballot. But I think it will hurt Republicans, overall. Like, if he has a poor economy, why would you vote Republican? I mean, it makes sense. And historically speaking, that the parties switch. The parties in power, switch back and forth. You won't see a party control by more than 8 years. I mean, it just goes back and forth. Like, for example, going all the way back to 2000, you had George, H.W. Bush, and then you had, Obama, and then you had Donald Trump, you had Biden. If you don't see, the pattern, it's Republican, Democrat, Republican, Democrat. It's never Republican, 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 or it's never Democrat, Democrat, Democrat. It's always going back and forth. So now in 2024, it was Republican, Donald Trump. So going forward, closer to 2028, it could switch back to Democrat, which would benefit them, obviously. I think, Joe Lombardo in Nevada has a very good chance at winning. I think his approval rating is very high. But I honestly do think he will win. But let's just say the GDP growth is going to do enough, to hurt. I'm not saying there will be a recession, but if it gets to that point where it's very close, like I mentioned, they're predicting it will be 2.8, and that the threshold to consider it a recession is anything below 2%. That is extremely close, guys. We were talking about an actual recession under Donald Trump. Trumpcession is what they're calling it, I believe. I think that could be enough to potentially unseat some of these Republican governors like Joe Lombardo. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but maybe it does end up happening. And then Arizona, you have Katie Hobbs, who you can argue should have lost because she wasn't even campaigning correctly. She wasn't even to be seen or heard of. Carrie Lake was just an utter disaster of a candidate. So if Republicans choose someone else other than Carrie Lake, then I think that could potentially unseat Katie Hobbs. But maybe if she is approved enough, if Arizonans like her, maybe she can win. But if she does, it's not going to be anything more than a percentage point. Matter of fact, I think she would actually lose. But let's just say if Trump continues with the poor economy, and by the way, his approval rating as of right now, I believe, is positive 0.8%. That's the last time I checked. Once it starts getting in the negatives, then that's not going to be good for Republicans, obviously. And then you have Georgia. I think that's going to be whoever's going to replace Brian Kemp. I think he is term limited. Yeah, he is term limited, actually. So he actually might run for Senate. We'll talk about that later. But I think no matter the Republican, they probably might win. But if it's a bad candidate, I think that gives Democrats a decent chance. Obviously, someone like Stacey Abrams will never win, so Democrats would have to look for a different direction. But Georgia is a very close state, and in my opinion, Democrats can actually win this on the general election if they choose the correct candidate. And if Republicans somehow choose a very weak candidate, I actually can see Georgia flipping blue on the general election in 2028. And then Wisconsin, you have Tony Evers. I'm not quite sure if he's going to run again. I think he might be term limited. Maybe not. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he might be term limited. So if that's the case, obviously he only won by like a percentage, or actually less than a percentage point last time. It's going to be very close. I think Republicans can, in fact, win. But I think Democrats do have the upper hand here. So let's just say they do win that governor's race as well. And then you have Michigan. Gretchen Whitmer, I think, will be term limited, and I think she might actually run for president in 2028. Doesn't matter. Michigan's governor's race will most likely go to any Democratic candidate. Doesn't really matter. You have Pennsylvania, obviously. Josh Shapiro, I think he's going to run in 2026 again, and then he's probably going to run for president in 2028. That's going to be likely Democrat. They should not worry about that. And then you have Maine. I believe it's Susan Collins, and polls time and time again suggest she's going to lose. She always wins here. Now I think this could be the chance that, the time that Democrats do end up winning with a terrible Trump economy. The only reason why Susan Collins kept winning with the first Trump administration because the economy is actually doing pretty good, and now it's not. So I think this time the polls would be right for once, and Susan Collins would be the losing candidate. So I think Democrats could actually win Maine. So 18-18, this is the tie for the 2026 governor's race. And this is how exactly the poor GDP growth, the bad Trump economy, could impact some of these future races in the near future. Like I mentioned earlier, an economist who correctly predicted the biggest crash of the 21st century, I believe, is now warning that Trump could be blamed for the next recession. You have the Atlanta Fed model predicting the GDP to shrink to just 2.8%. And if that is going to actually happen, that is very close. That is 0.8% away from 2%, which is considered a recession. We are now closer to recession, more than ever under Donald Trump. And Republicans have argued that this would happen under Biden. And guess what? Now it's happening pretty closely for Donald Trump. And then this also could affect the 2026 Senate race. There are 4 major races: Michigan, North Carolina, Georgia, Alaska, and Maine. Actually, potentially 5 if this one scenario happens. If, Mary Petola ends up running for the Senate, because she's a representative, obviously. She actually lost, which is the only House race I incorrectly predicted. She lost by about 4 percentage points. So she would be a strong Democratic candidate, which is the only way I see them winning Alaska. I'm going to tell you right now, I don't think this is going to happen. But if the GDP growth continues to do poorly, the economy continues to do bad, and if Trump keeps those tariffs in place, and if prices will continue to rise and stay very high, and if Mary Petola runs for Alaska's Senate race, I think she can actually win. I'm not saying she will win, because she lost her representative race her congressional race by about 4 points. So she can very well lose again. But let's just say if Democrats get lucky, they win that. And then they could win Georgia. Let's just say Brian Kemp does not run for Senate. Then John Ossoff, who won the special election back in 2020, would win this race. Again, Georgia is a left-trendy state. It is shifting towards the left in favor of Democrats. This would be very beneficial to the Democratic Party. Let's just say they somehow win North Carolina's Senate race. I'm not sure who the candidate is, but their governor actually is a Democrat, by the way. He won by 14%. So this state also could do good for Democrats. And then you have the state of Michigan, Alyssa Slotkin. I'm not sure if she's going to be running in this specific race, but she recently just won by under percentage point against Mike Rogers. I think Mike Rogers can actually win this state. I mean, he did pretty good actually. Whether it's Mike Rogers or John James, I think those two candidates are very decent. But because of the state of the economy is not doing very well right now, and if Donald Trump's approval rating continues to shrink because that is a trend, it is decreasing, not increasing, I could see Democrats hanging on to this once again. And then we're down to one Senate race. I think this is actually Susan Collins. Excuse me. I was talking about Susan Collins for the governor's race. No, she's running for Senate. I think Democrats can win Maine's Senate race, defeating Susan Collins for finally, after polls and polls suggest she's going to lose. I think, just like I mentioned earlier, for Maine's governor's race, this is the Senate. This is the real race that Susan Collins is in. I know I made that error in which I said she was running for governor. No, she's running for Senate. I think Democrats can finally unseat her. So in their best case scenario, with everything going in their way, benefiting them, a bad economy, bad GDP, prices are at an all-time high, 50-50, they will still lose because J.D. Vance is the tiebreaker, obviously. So they're not going to win the Senate no matter what in 2026. And then this could also impact the 2028 election as well. If Democrats nominate their strongest candidate, in my opinion, I believe Josh Shapiro. I truly believe he will give them the best chance of winning in 2028. Let's just say he goes up against J.D. Vance, which is probably the most likely scenario. He's going to lock down Minnesota. It's going to be likely. Obviously, he's going to lock down his own home state of Pennsylvania. He's going to win it by a very comfortable, decent margin. And then I think he will lock down Wisconsin by a lean margin, probably win that by 4 to maybe 5 percentage points. He's a very strong candidate up in the Rust Belt, but you know who is as well? J.D. Vance. But I think Josh Shapiro is just way better. I mean, he has proven to win in a swing state that Donald Trump won by 1.5 percentage point. He won that by 14 points, similar to Mark Robinson losing by 14 points in North Carolina. So you could actually compare North Carolina to Pennsylvania's governor's race. So I think Josh Shapiro is going to win Michigan. And the only reason why Donald Trump won Michigan in 2024 was because of the Gaza issue. Now, that's going to haunt him, actually. So I think Michigan is actually going to shift to the left, in my opinion. And then you have New Hampshire. I think this state's actually getting bluer. Has a lot of college-educated voters in this state. I think that's going to be a likely Democratic state in 2028. So this is the pathway for the Democrats, obviously, through the Rust Belt, because I think at this time, Republicans will lock down the Sun Belt. I think the Sun Belt is out of reach for Democrats. I think the only path forward is the Rust Belt, 270 to 268. And this is exactly how the GDP growth, the poor economy, the high prices at the grocery store, all these factors will be beneficial to the Democratic Party in these future elections. So leave your thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below. Do you think this Atlanta Fed model will be correct, that the GDP will shrink to just 2.8%? And like I mentioned, all it takes for a recession is to be at 2%. That is 0.8% away if the number is correct. So one last final reminder is to subscribe, click the bell so you don't miss out my content. Press the like button, share this video. Don't forget we have memberships. You can find links to that in the description section if you are interested. That's pretty much it. Thank you everyone for watching.